have bile acid malabsorption, then you need to watch this video because I'm going to show you how I overcame mine. I used to be super skinny and I had diarrhea all the time, and my stools would be super watery, sometimes foamy and green, and almost always very, very stinky. And this is a sign that there's bile in the stool because the intestines isn't fully reabsorbing it. But bile acid malabsorption, or BAM, is kind of a misleading term because it doesn't hint at what the root causes. It almost hints at that it's the intestines' fault, is that there's so much bile in your stool and in your stool. And that's really not the case. Now I show you everything I did to get better for my Crohn's, colitis, and bile acid malabsorption in my 13-day protocol. In my free webinar, I go over like all the basic details on what it is and how I used it to get better. It's like a step-by-step plan. So bile is made in your liver and it gets stored in your gallbladder. Now I'm just gonna like cut straight to the chase. There's a ton of science, but everybody with bile acid malabsorption is gonna have a ring in their brain CT scan in the right temporal lobe, probably right about here. This is a sign we had a conflict shock of indigestible anger. And somebody with this might have like depression. They might be depressed. And so it puts the gallbladder and the gallbladder ducts into overdrive. And there's a lot of more details on what's exactly going on there, but I'm just gonna like simplify it at that. Now, when that happens, or when we experience, like let's say my teacher yelled at me, mine started in school, and I'd always get yelled at at my teachers for bringing action figures and Game Boys to school. It used to make me like really angry when they would take away my Game Boy and I wouldn't get it back for a week. Like there's nothing I could do about it, and so it put my gallbladder into overdrive to help me deal with the situation. When that happens, or I experience a PTSD reminder, a PTSD trigger, like let's say my teacher started it, but then I go home and my parents take away my Nintendo or my Game Boy, or my girlfriend's yelling at me to get off, get off the game, or my boss is telling me, hey, get off the game, you should be working, I'm paying you to work, or something like that. That 10 years later will put the gallbladder into overdrive. And what that does is it dumps all the bile into the intestines. Bile it's like bleach. It's super soapy. It's irritating. All that bile is not supposed to be in your intestines all at once. And when it hits your intestines, your intestines send the signal to the brain saying like, hey, we got some caustic stuff in here. We got some hot stuff in here. What should we do? And the brain goes, get it out of here. And you get diarrhea. And it gets flushed out of your system and not absorbed. So it's not the intestines' fault for not absorbing the bile acid. It is the conflict that puts your gallbladder into overdrive that causes it, or the PTSD triggers, the PTSD reminders that dump the bile into the intestines, and then the intestines have to shoot it out because it's just too, it burns when it comes out. It's green, it's smelly. It has to get it out. It's so irritating. It's so irritating to the tissue. The brain's like, get it out of here. So the way we get better is we find the conflict shock that put our gut into overdrive, and then the PTSD triggers that we're encountering on a date. Like when you have to run to the bathroom, you need to be like, okay, what just happened? Like I was playing a video game, my girlfriend yelled at me to stop playing games, and I had to run to the bathroom. That reminds me of the time my teacher took away my Pokemon, and she didn't let me save it, and I lost my Mewtwo and my Master Ball, and I was super angry. Never forgave her, and I remember that's when I started to get really bad diarrhea. And so I have these steps I take somebody through, and it's in my 13-day protocol to help find this conflict and then process it so it's not putting your gallbladder in and out of overdrive.